What's up, guys? Toad back with you again a few hours later, basically, after a little bit of sleep. Thanks for hanging out with me last night, the college football show. There are 4 plays that I gave out, and I gave out some what I think are pretty strong leans as well. In addition to that, there are games that I almost bet. I'm going to talk about one more college football game, actually, because I mentioned it last night, and I forgot to actually give the analysis on it, but I think it's another decent side lean that I forgot to mention. As far as my plays in college football, you can go watch the video to see the analysis, but I am on Iowa -3, Miami, Ohio -2.5, NC State +3, UCLA +4. I think all those lines are pretty much all still out there. You might even be able to get slightly better numbers on some of them. I don't know, but I think they're all still around the same number that they were last night, and all the market percentages look basically what they looked like last night, so no real change there to report. So that's what's going on with college football. I'm going to talk about an additional college football game real quick, although I do have NHL up right now. I'm going to talk about NHL because I do have one play in the NHL, and I'm not going to play on this MLB game that's going on today, but I will talk about it. The one other game that I mentioned was the Georgia Tech game, where I think Georgia Tech is in a bad spot, dude. So we look at this Georgia Tech at North Carolina. I briefly alluded to it in last night's video and forgot to actually give the analysis. Georgia Tech is sitting at 3.5 as a road favorite here. We see 53% of the tickets are actually on North Carolina somehow. Excuse me. Oh, man, as I knock my mic just because I'm laughing at how ridiculous I think that is. I don't really see how that's the case, really, other than the fact that everybody knows North Carolina has a pretty good offense. So I guess maybe that would be why North Carolina is getting the public ticket percentage, but they do have 65% of the cash on them. So the cash percentage is on North Carolina. Georgia Tech, I mean, a couple of reasons why I don't want to actually play on North Carolina here, even though I lean that way because of the scheduling spot. North Carolina, I mean, their defense is really, really questionable at best. I mean, it's bad. So that's one reason why I thought it had been improving a bit, but it still looks quite bad. So one reason I don't want to do it is that. But Georgia Tech also has an underrated offense. Their offense is actually really good with King there, quarterback, a very dynamic dual threat quarterback. That offense, I think, continues to fly under the radar. But I think it's a sandwich spot for Georgia Tech, so the situation would dictate a play on North Carolina here. Georgia Tech, they're coming off that pretty big win where I had Georgia Tech last week where I laid the points against Duke. Duke, I told you Duke was overrated. They were a kind of a counterfeit 5-0. But they were still 5-0, and still beating a 5-0 team is pretty big. You knock off an undefeated team and their undefeated season. Still a pretty big win for Georgia Tech. This game, maybe they won't consider to be as big against UNC. And up next, Georgia Tech certainly has a big game that I mentioned last night when I talked about Notre Dame. Georgia Tech is playing Notre Dame in the Atlanta Falcons Stadium in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So that's a big game. I think it's going to be a big TV game there. Playing in an NFL stadium against a very good, very ranked Notre Dame team that is, I don't know if I would say they're very good, but they're definitely quite good. So that is, at least a pretty big look-ahead spot, if it's not also a sandwich spot for Georgia Tech here. North Carolina, I mean, they are also coming off a pretty big game, though, so that is the other thing that gives me a little bit of hesitation. On the North Carolina side, they're coming off, I believe, a pretty big game against Pitt, where they wound up losing the game by 10 or whatever it was. So Georgia Tech, I do think, is in the worst spot, though. So a little bit of an additional lean there to North Carolina plus the points, but not playing that one. That game, I actually like the over better in that game, even though the cash percentage doesn't look to be indicating on it. North Carolina is up from 57.5 to 59.5, so it is a somewhat high total. 79% of the tickets and only 77% of the cash. So the cash percentage is actually less than the ticket percentage, but I don't really see how this game doesn't go over. I mean, both of those teams played kind of uncharacteristically lower scoring games last. Well, North Carolina still put up 24 points in their game or whatever. I think it was 34-24. So Pitt, North Carolina, that's a game you expect to be high scoring. But both of these offenses can definitely score in this game. And North Carolina's defense, as I said, is quite bad. And Georgia Tech's probably leaves a little something still to be desired there as well. So I do like that game to go over as well. I think that game could be one of the higher scoring games this week, to be honest. And don't make me look like a fool and have that game be low scoring as well. Georgia Tech's game last week was a lot lower scoring than I thought. Like, Georgia Tech's offense is good enough that I thought they would exploit Duke's defense, and that we would finally see Duke's defense be kind of exposed because they hadn't really played anybody yet. But Georgia Tech's offense didn't really do that great in that game. Duke's offense definitely struggled. But this is a game, yeah, it looks like an offensive, like an almost all offense game to me, in my opinion. Let's go to Major League Baseball, right? We have the ALDS game between Detroit and Cleveland, Game 5. And I told you what Detroit was doing, man. They were trying to win it in 4 games, and they went with the bullpen game. They were trying to win that game so that they could have Skubal lined up to pitch Game 1 of the ALCS against the Yankees. But that was not to be. I had that game on, Detroit-Cleveland. It was a close game, and it could have gone either way, really. It was like each team was just scoring 1 run back and forth until Cleveland finally won the game by 1 run, basically. Detroit, so they are using Skubal in this game because it's the deciding game, man, and they want to advance. So Skubal, we know how good he is. And Cleveland putting up a more questionable pitcher, let's say, with Matthew Boyd on the mound, which Cleveland, I mean, I think very likely you're going to see Cleveland going into their bullpen earlier than Detroit does in this game. Detroit's got their ace on the mound who's been nothing short of really, really excellent in the playoffs so far. And Cleveland, I think Cleveland's going to be bringing out all the stops because Cleveland did have one of the better bullpens in baseball throughout the course of the season. So Cleveland's bullpen probably is going to get use here. And these teams didn't play yesterday, so both teams are probably going to be able to bring out any of the relief pitchers that they want to, basically, to try to win this game. Skubal, well, I mean, as far as the side is concerned, Detroit's actually down from -130 to -113. It was listed at -130 when Cleveland was undecided on their pitcher. And they announced Boyd, and the line actually moved from -130 to -113. So the market is actually giving some respect to Boyd because his numbers have been pretty good this year. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, if you're giving me Skubal at -113 against a pretty questionable, in my opinion, pitcher on the other side, I'm leaning to the Detroit side in this one. They have the starting pitching edge. Cleveland does have the slight bullpen and offensive edge, but I think the starting pitching edge may be fairly significant on the Detroit side, but you never really know because Boyd also hasn't really done anything wrong as far as the playoffs are concerned so far. But the market is reflecting what I just said about the side. 70% of the tickets, so the public is also coming in on Skubal. They know the deal at this point, but 79% of the cash is also on Detroit. So the cash percentage is on the Detroit side. I agree with it just because Skubal has been so good, man. I mean, like I keep saying, he should be the AL Cy Young winner. 2.39 ERA, 0.92 whip. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. Obviously he's one of my favorites. I'm gay for Skubal, man. Tarek Skubal, let's go. He's just been flying under the radar, I think, for much of the season. He's done nothing wrong, and he started pitching basically even better once we got into September. 1.52 ERA, 27-2 strikeout walk ratio in September. And then in the playoffs, he's gone 13 innings across 2 starts and allowed only 7 hits and no earned runs and only 1 walk and 14 strikeouts against Houston and Cleveland, both on the road. So not exactly easy offenses to face. And the game in this series was the better of the two, where he went 7 innings, 3 hits, no earned runs, 8 strikeouts, no walks against this Cleveland team. So, yeah, it does mean that Cleveland did just see him recently, but Cleveland had already seen him a couple of times, and I don't know if it helped that much. He's just been really good, and he seems to be he seems to be a big game pitcher to me, man, based on what we've seen in the playoffs so far. I think these have been his first playoff starts because Detroit has not been in the playoffs for like a decade. So he's living up to the hype, man, and he's performing very well in pressure situations here in the playoffs. So I don't really see a reason for that not to continue here, other than the fact that Cleveland does now have a second straight game against him. So, yeah, I mean, maybe they won't get as dominated as they did in the previous game, but I think Skubal, he's still a guy who's very consistent and probably going to give you a good start more often than not, almost every single time he gets out there. Against Skubal, Cleveland, pretty weak offensive numbers, 18 for 82. They've never hit a home run off him. 22-3 strikeout walk ratio, 220 average, and 564 OPS. So very weak offensive numbers from Cleveland. Cleveland's got a good offense, but obviously Skubal. I mean, he's just such a great pitcher, man, that he has really good numbers against a lot of offenses, and Cleveland is no exception. On the other side, Matthew Boyd, definitely more of a question mark, man. He's the older pitcher. He's in his 30s. Did pitch well this season, 2.72 ERA, 1.13 whip, but I still question it, man, because look at his career stats. Like, how do you all of a sudden do this? Although now he is facing his former team, who he was actually on Detroit last year as well. He spent most of his career with Detroit and then was back on Detroit last year. So maybe that does actually give him a little bit of extra motivation because he wants to beat the team that got rid of him, and he's done way better with Cleveland than with any of these other teams throughout his career. But this is crazy, dude. I mean, over his career, he has a 4.85 ERA and 1.31 whip going all the way back to 2015. So do we really trust that he's actually as good as his numbers suggest they are this year in a smaller sample size of eight starts at the age of 33? Like, did Cleveland's pitching coaching staff like find something completely different? Did something change? I'm hesitant to say that it has, because this sample size of his entire career like looms kind of large to me, man. So I still don't think Boyd is as good as he's looked this season. And he did pitch well, decently enough in this first game against Detroit, but he's no Skubal. He had a 4 2/3 inning shutout, and it wound up being a loss. Which was this a game against Skubal? I think it might have been. Let me see here. I think it was the same pitching matchup, if I remember correctly. It was Skubal against Boyd. So obviously in that game, Cleveland had to go into their bullpen earlier. I think probably it's going to be the same here. That was the game where Clace gave up 3 runs, and it was a tied game, scoreless game late into the game. And Clace gave it up uncharacteristically. But Boyd, you're going to expect him to be the first of these two starting pitchers to exit, man. Skubal is obviously the better starting pitcher, as I said. In this game, I mean, yeah, it looks okay that Boyd didn't allow any runs in 4 2/3, but he did allow 4 hits and 2 walks, so he did put a few 2 men on base, more than you would like to see. 5 strikeouts isn't that bad, so a decent start from him, but nothing earth-shattering. And looking at his performances down the stretch, I mean, maybe they were like shortening his starts to get him ready for the playoffs, so he had a lot of shortened starts there, not going more than 4 1/3 in any of his last 3 to finish the season. And like I said, he has not pitched very much this season. And really, I mean, the offenses that he's faced, he did have a good start against the Dodgers on the road, so that's good. The other good offense that he faced, the Yankees, he struggled in that game, putting 8 men on base and allowing 3 earned runs, 2 home runs. Kind of ridiculous that he didn't allow more than 3 earned runs in that game. So definitely more reasons to like Skubal than Boyd here. So I do lean to the Detroit side in that one, because I think the starting pitching edge puts that one over the top for Detroit. And I also do actually like the under, which we see the market indicating on the under, but this is like, the total is so low, man. It's 6 juice to the under heavily. So it's like the total is teetering on 5.5. When do you ever see 5.5 as a total in Major League Baseball, dude? So, I mean, I think it's just too dangerous to play the under, even though this has the looks of a very low-scoring game to me, with Cleveland maybe even going with a bullpen approach, and maybe Boyd will exit a bit early, and Cleveland will go with their quite good bullpen. So we'll see what happens. And, of course, Skubal, the ace on the other side there. 52% of the tickets on the over, but 67% of the cash on the under. So I do agree with the under, but with Boyd being one of the starting pitchers and the total being this low, I'm not sure that total is really reflecting that Boyd might, he could potentially be in line for a bit of a regression here. So that's how I look at that game. No play for me on that game. Probably, I like the Detroit side probably better than the under in that one, as you could probably tell based on my analysis. And we'll look at NHL. We have a full NHL slate, although it looks like Tampa Bay is still having issues in the aftermath of the hurricane. So Carolina, Tampa Bay looks like it got moved. Looks like they were playing a home and home. I'm going to have to start looking, man, because it is the start of hockey season. One of my angles that I like is the annual dad trip that a lot of teams do, where hockey teams, at some point during the season, many of them go on a 2-game road trip, and they take their fathers with them on the road trip. And it tends to be an added advantage. So you can find like an edge on those teams, although the books know about this at this point. But when it first started, you could really find an edge on those road hockey teams on the dad trip because they were on the road, so they were usually like an underdog somewhere, and you could get them at a nice underdog price in a situation where they're like extra motivated and really happy to play because their fathers are there with them. So that's something to look out for there. And it's really hard to actually find information on when these teams are actually going on their dad trip. So I get like angry when I miss the fact that, oh, this was a dad trip. And sometimes I'll have a play on a team just because I like them anyway and find out later, oh, that was actually the dad trip. And then when the team gets back from the dad trip, it actually tends to be a bit of a letdown type of spot, even though it's not a long road trip. Because, I like fading teams returning home from long road trips, but the return home from the dad trip, even though it's a 2-game trip, tends to also be bad. Hockey, I don't see a whole lot of angles here, man, to be honest. Even though we do have a full slate of hockey, it's really early in the season. A lot of these teams have only played one game so far. Very oddly, Washington and Anaheim, I believe neither of them have played a game yet this season. So I'm thinking that probably has to mean that the team that has played games already has an advantage, right? Because they're already off and running this season, but the market seems to not reflect that, with New Jersey down from minus 145 to minus 139. Very public with 88% of the tickets because I believe they're off to a 2-1 start, and Washington wasn't good last year, so people don't want Washington. But 69% of the cash is actually on Washington, even though, like I said, I would think that Washington would be at a bit of a disadvantage because they haven't played yet in the regular season, but the market doesn't reflect that being the case, and it also doesn't in the Anaheim-San Jose game, with Anaheim flipping from plus 102 to minus 128 as a road favorite here. Don't really see percentages yet in the market. But San Jose, I mean, they are coming off a big game, though. So they're coming off that, well, somewhat big game, I guess. It was a game where they had to put in a lot of effort at the very least, where they had the lead very late against the St. Louis Blues, and they blew the lead right at the end and then wound up losing in overtime, which sounds familiar. It's going to factor into my only hockey play today as well. So San Jose is coming off a pretty big effort, tough game, so maybe that does have something to do with why Anaheim has flipped to the favorite there. But Anaheim coming in with their first game of the season, man, so I'm not sure that I would agree with that one. A few teams are on back-to-backs. Philadelphia is one of them. Philadelphia, I believe, overcame a deficit last night at Vancouver, and they wound up pulling off the upset at Vancouver, winning in a shootout. So Philadelphia on a back-to-back after a shootout win over a team that was pretty good last year and is still probably pretty good in Vancouver. I think that puts Philadelphia in a pretty tough spot. They're in the back-to-back off a big game. Calgary has moved down a little bit, though, from minus 130 to minus 124. Calgary was off. I think they've been off for a couple of days, actually. But Calgary, they are also coming off a tough game, also against Vancouver. So not really a situation where I want to actually fade Calgary, because I think they're also in a letdown spot, even though they haven't played for 3 days. They've had 2 days off. They also had an overtime game against Vancouver that they wound up winning. So both of these teams coming off overtime wins at Vancouver. Kind of crazy that is the case there. So both teams, I think, are in letdown spots, in my opinion there. The win might mean a little bit more to Calgary, I think, just because I think it is like a divisional game there. So I don't like either side in that one. I think both teams are in letdown spots. Again, it's a situation where potentially looking to play an over in that one. And we see cash evenly split on the total, but 64% of the tickets are evenly split. Excuse me. It's 60% of the cash is actually on the over in that one. So potentially an over in that one. I mentioned a similar situation last night where I thought both teams might be a little bit gassed in St. Louis and Vegas, and that game did indeed go over the total. Vegas, St. Louis. So lean to the over in Calgary, Philadelphia, more than the side in that one. That is not my play, although maybe I should start playing more. I don't play a lot of totals anywhere, man, but that does look like a decent total angle there to me. So maybe I should start playing totals. If that game goes over, and I'm like leaving this money out there, man. I mean, but this is just how selective I am, man. Where you can see with my college football video, if you watched it last night, I had a bunch of strong leans, and I laid off of like a whole bunch of them. Mr. Goodcat, what's up, brother? You're in? You just happen to look in, and you're wondering if you're the only viewer? We have 4 viewers right now. Someone welded. Yeah, there are many other welded people watching right now. Yeah, I'm gonna steal the LP nomination away, man. It's up for grabs right now. It's a counterfeit nomination for Chase Oliver, Toad 2024. You can still write me in. I'm filed with the FEC, but I do have to I don't know. I think I have to file that like quarterly report again or something. I hate all that crap. So I do have to get that done. Even though I have no financials, no funding at all. All right. What do we got going on here? My actual play in the NHL, let's just get to it, and I'll make this a pretty short video, and then I'll get out of here. And we'll have, hopefully, a happy Saturday for everyone with my college plays and hockey play. I'm laying a giant favorite in hockey, man. It seems like a dumb idea, laying a big favorite who's also a public favorite, but I think the spot dictates this, man. And this is Edmonton -1.5 on the puck line, so you need them to win by at least 2. -130, so they're such a huge favorite. You actually have to pay a price to lay the puck line with them. You could probably lay a -2 puck line at plus money, but I think that's kind of pushing a little bit. I think laying -130, it is a little bit of a steep price, but I think the situation calls for this, man. We have a nice like conflagration of events that I look for here that put me on the Edmonton side in this one. Edmonton is up from -340 to -355 on the money line, so I don't want to play the money line. So I'm going to play them to win this game I'm going to play them to win this game by margin here. 77% of the tickets are on Edmonton, so they are public because of course they are. They're Edmonton. They have Connor McDavid. They have a great scoring offense, which didn't show up in the first game, thankfully for me, because I won playing Winnipeg against them in that first game. 93% of the cash, however, is on Edmonton. So it looks like legitimate money driving the line up on Edmonton. I'm agreeing with this, obviously. I look at the situation we have here, man. Chicago played last night, and they played it to overtime against Winnipeg. And the way that they lost that game was brutal, man. I think this is a bad spot for Chicago. They went into overtime last night. They were winning the game 1-0 for almost the whole game from like the late second period on. They gave up a third period goal, a game-tying goal with almost a minute left in all of regulation to Mark Schifele. And then that sent it into overtime, and the Jets scored, I guess, was that 38 seconds into overtime? Or no, 38 seconds left in overtime. So I guess it was about to go to a shootout, and Schifele scored the goal to win the game in overtime. Brutal, brutal way for the Blackhawks to lose that game, man. They were going to get their first win of the season, a pretty decent win over a good Jets team who's been in the playoffs like most years recently. Chicago, I mean, they put in a huge effort in that game, man, and losing that game like that, brutal, absolutely brutal. When you have the game won, essentially, then you lose it right at the end. Talking about giving up a tying goal right at the end of regulation and then losing in overtime. Really crazy, brutal way to lose that game. And Chicago did get outplayed a little bit in this game, and Winnipeg did outshoot them. Not really a surprise. Winnipeg outpossessed them a lot. Chicago, I watched a little bit of the Utah game. Chicago, they are a team that really has trouble maintaining possession, man. They just have not looked good in these first two games. It seemed like Utah was in like the offensive zone the entire time I had that game on the other night, and the Jets, it seemed like it was basically no different, although the Jets were not able to convert that into actual scoring. But Chicago seems to have a really tough time actually maintaining possession of the puck, so that does seem to be a problem. And now who are they facing? They're facing an Edmonton team that I think is not only going to be pissed off, but has had 2 days off. They last played on the 9th in that game where I won. That was my last hockey play. I've taken days off from hockey. I played Winnipeg as a big underdog in that one, and Winnipeg beat Edmonton 6-0. Just ridiculous. The game was all Winnipeg, but the Oilers did outshoot them. I mean, they outshoot almost everybody in every game by 10. But Edmonton was also taking a lot of shots in desperation. But Edmonton, we all know, they're an offense that can score a lot. Very good offense. This 0-goal performance is not really indicative of what they actually are. Connor Hellebuck, one of the best goalies in hockey. He was able to hold Edmonton scoreless. He played again in that Chicago game last night, and had another good game, although he gave up one goal, but still. I mean, are you gonna damn him for allowing one goal, even though it was to Chicago? No, I don't think you are. Oilers outpossessed Winnipeg pretty significantly in this game too. So the Oilers, possibly the best offense in hockey, an offense that does maintain possession, and they are going to get a lot of scoring opportunities, a lot of shots at you. So that game, misleading, and I think it's going to serve to anger Edmonton. And then those couple of days off, I think is going to help Edmonton like refocus. I think they're going to use that time off to refocus. Like, I don't think they're going to overlook anybody after they lost 6-0. They're pissed off. They want to get this first win, and Chicago just happens to be the the unlucky recipient of this anger, I think, in this game. Chicago with no rest at all, having to play a brutal overtime game and losing in just such a ridiculous fashion last night, puts Chicago in a hangover spot. Edmonton's in a bounce back spot. Edmonton is the way better team. And when you have the way better team who is probably going to actually be focused and try to win this game, I think that's a team you want to be on. You want to back them. It's going to be danger, even though, yes, they're a public favorite. There's the situations where you want to back that good team are situations like this, where they're up against an inferior, where the inferior team is in a much worse scheduling spot. Looks like they have a big rest disadvantage, a big situational and emotional disadvantage, and that good team has reason to actually show up and try in this game, and that's going to be the case here with Edmonton. So Edmonton -1.5 on the puck line, -130 is what you have to pay for that. So that's the play. And once again, in college football, I have Iowa -3, Miami, Ohio -2.5, North Carolina State +3, UCLA +4. Let's get it done, man. Charles, what's up? We got 8 live viewers on a Saturday morning show, man. An oil spill? What do you mean? You're going to, like, jizz all over the place? I don't know what we're talking about here. Will, thank you, sir. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Nice, short, easy Saturday video because it's all college football, and I covered it on my almost 2-hour video. For the second straight week, I almost went 2 hours on that. Go check that out. There's still a little bit of time to watch most of that video before the noon kickoffs. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Thank you guys for hanging out. Charles, Edmonton Oilers. Yeah, you like that play? Let's get it. Follow me on Twitter, obviously, and follow the Tower Gang podcast. We're everywhere, you know. We're the most offensive comedy podcast on the planet every Wednesday night, 9:11 p.m. Eastern. Tower time, baby. Sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/towergang, and you get live pre-show, live post-show. Hang out with us in a Telegram. Submit mailbag questions or scenarios in the Telegram. The mailbag, you know, if you follow us, you know what to do, man. Just give us something that we can work with, that we can riff off of, that's an extremely ridiculous hypothetical, basically. Those work out the best. Thank you guys for hanging out. Have a good one. Peace out. Tower Gang, Tower Gang, Tower Gang, as Mark Random would say. Have a good one, guys.